Into another edition of Clippers Talk, off-season edition, but we are getting close. Preseason basketball is starting up on Saturday. Clippers in Hawaii, in Honolulu, taking on the Golden State Warriors. I feel like I'm bringing on somebody and I'm going through some time travel here as we're starting the first segment of Clippers Countdown or something. But right now, joining the show is your former voice of the Clippers. Did it for 4 seasons. But now here in LA, you see him on NBC4, on NBC, on the Peacock, of course, with Big 10 Saturday night. And I love it. It's the young GOAT, Noah Eagle, here on Clippers Talk. Noah, my friend, how we doing?
Double A, you just made me think of something. So I think they just left yesterday after media day. I know you were there in your suit per usual. It looked like with a nice blue steel on your selfie that you put out there to the world. But it made me remember my first year doing the job, and I was fresh out of college, and I was trying to, just get to know everybody before I got there. And so your number was passed along, and I reached out to you and I called you. And we talked for like 5 minutes, and I was like, "Hey, man, really looking forward to it." You're like, yeah. So am I. So am I. I'm like, great. And so I was like, wow, that was kind of short. That was odd. And then literally the next time I saw you, I think it was at media day. You're like, yeah, that was my bad, man. I was at a bar. I couldn't really talk, and I was like, oh, dude, that's cool. That's cool. And from that moment on, I was like, oh, this guy's great. This guy's awesome, because I just remember sitting next to you at media day. And I think you made a couple jokes. And I'm like, oh, this is going to go really, really well. But I remember that first phone conversation. I'm like, who is this dude? This Adam Oslin? What's his deal? And it ended up working out.
Hey, I stopped drinking a couple years ago. That was at Tin Horn Flats in Burbank, which is no longer an establishment, or at least they're going through some legal issues. Nothing to do with me.
Okay. I was going to say, I just figured once you stop drinking, you put them out of business.
Many have said that the Hollywood way. Look, we're all better off with me in this mode. Now I'm just working, baby. Now it's all Clippers 24/7.
Dude, what is it? 10% body fat? I see the videos.
I'm trying, and I did run a marathon on Saturday. Granted, it was on a treadmill. Big brother Jake told me that's even harder because I got nothing to look at.
Yeah, way harder. What'd you listen to? Did you listen were you listening to music? Were you watching something? What were you doing?
I had, let's see, Deftones. I went through almost the entire album of Adrenaline, which is a band from Sacramento, hardcore rock, and they're still going now, like in their 40s and 50s. And that did me some good because it was just very nostalgic for me. It's an album from 1995. So, time flies when you're listening to music you're already familiar with. And it took 5 hours and I think 36 minutes to complete this bad boy, the 26.2 miles. But then I was listening to, of course, just a bunch of Clippers podcasts. Brian Seaman, he was on the Lob the Jam, the podcast. I was listening to Clips Forum. I was listening to Locked On Clippers. I just absorb as much Clippers content as possible. You know this.
Oh, no, I do. Like, people, I think, just assume, oh, Adam, just whatever. No, it's very much real. This is not any bit of an act. It is authentic Adam Oslin. That's AAA for you. We can take it 1A further, and it's not easy A. This is a difficult A to attain.
It was definitely authentic today and real when I was getting into an argument with Fred Rogan on AM 570, as he is such a Clippers hater, Noah. I don't know if he ever had you on Going Rogan at some point. He loves you. He says you're also the young GOAT. He admires you, but he's a Clippers hater through and through.
No doubt.
Today he said, give me some storylines for the Clippers. So I'm talking about Kawhi, and then he's like, okay, enough. Let's get to the Lakers. I'm like, Fred, we got more to talk about here. Terrence Mann, Zubac's extensions, Jeff Van Gundy, Intuit Dome. And he said this. I go into Intuit Dome, and he's like, already been there. Don't care. What? Like, how do you dismiss the eighth wonder of the world like that?
Well, what did he go for? Bruno? What did he do?
I don't know. He probably just went there with an old NBC4 truck or something like that to sneak his way in, because I know he's working in Palm Springs now. I don't know if it was even a concert. He just got his own private tour, so he felt like he had experienced everything.
I did always enjoy listening to you battle with him when I would be randomly driving on a Wednesday afternoon or whatever it might be. It was always great entertainment for me. And now that I don't have to drive anymore, weird flex of being in New York. But now that I don't have to drive anymore, that is probably the only thing I do miss about being behind the wheel is hearing randomly you defending the Clippers' honor on AM 570. It was always excellent.
I did my best. It's tough going against Fred. That's like Jon Snow and the Battle of the Bastards, the
Oh,
lone swordsman out there in the
at least he
field.
doesn't say you know nothing, Adam Oslin. At least he acknowledges you know some things.
Damn straight. All right. Let's get into, before we talk Clippers, I want to get your opinion on the latest this offseason, where the team has gone since you've been gone. But I want to talk about your new gig a little bit. And currently, something more recent that happened this summer. I want to reflect a little bit because there was the call of the summer, a call to live on for ages. And it happened in the gold medal game between France, while in France and Team USA. And it was the golden dagger call with Steph Curry going off for Team USA. You're on the call with Dwayne Wade. Talk about the experience in France and calling one of the most prestigious moments in international sports.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, the funny thing is, I think a lot of people, most people ask me just to go to that moment with Steph where he hits the fourth three, whatever, third three in a row, basically. But I mean, he had, I think, what, 7 or 8. He had like a combined 17 in the last 2 games, which was insane. And I had obviously seen a lot of Steph Curry performances, but it was the first time I actually got to be semi on his side and calling the game. Like, think about, do you remember the game that he had against the Clippers where he had, I think, 50 at Staples,
Yeah, like
and the
30 in
Clippers
the
still
first
won?
quarter.
Yeah, but the Clippers still won that game. But he had like there were so many highlights in that one that I could call, but I didn't really get to get fully creative and let it rip because he was on the opposing team. And the same with the Nets now or whatever else. There was the one at Chase Center where he had 25 in the first quarter against the Clips. He and Paul George were dueling in that one. That was the PG saying, "I'm from the logo too," I'm from the logo too game. So I had all those experiences and I kind of knew how to call a Steph game, but I never actually got to do it where I really got to do it, if that makes sense. And so I was just excited that I actually got to be excited for him for once because it is brutal when you're the opponent and he just does that to you. And so everything that everybody in that arena that was French, which was a large portion of it, was feeling, I had felt before. So I kind of knew that end of it. But the jubilation that came from what he did was incredible. And that was really the case for the entire Olympics because I did a number of non-US games as well. I did the US men and women. I did non-US men and women's games. And the one thing that really stood out to me is it was the only time so far in my career that everybody back home that was watching, and I mean just about everybody, maybe not you, because I know you declared something about the French team with Nico, but basically 99% of the people watching here in America where we're broadcasting, we're rooting for one side, which is you never get that. Even now in the modern NBA, if you're calling for a team, because it's basically national and there's league pass and same with radio and Sirius XM, you get fans of all different teams tuning in to your games. And so you never have a basically 100% approval rating on anything. And so it was just fascinating that the way I called these games, like the Serbia game that was the semifinal with the US men, where they're down 17 in the third quarter, there was this moment where I'm like, oh, I'm going to be hated forever. Dwayne and I are literally going to be hated figures because we called this failure of US basketball, and Dwayne already got third place and a bronze medal in 2004. He's going to be like the scapegoat of USA basketball forever, and I'm going to be the guy who had to call Serbia upsetting them with Jokic, and everyone's going to hate us. And then they win that game, and it completely flips, and everyone's like, "These guys are awesome," because we were all excited, and everyone was excited together. So yeah, it was really cool. It was some of the most fun I had. I will say that the other thing that people asked me was, "Did you have any of those calls ready to go?" You know me. You worked with me for 4 years. I don't come up with anything ahead of time. It's whatever is in the moment is what comes out. But I will say that all 4 of those years of doing the Clipper games prepared me for every one of those moments because I felt like I'd seen everything with the Clippers. And I really had seen just about everything with the Clippers. And think about some of the games that we got to do in those 4 years. I mean, the 31-point or the 35-point comeback. I'm thinking of the other one. The 31-point comeback was right before I got there. 35-point comeback against the Wizards. The 25-point comeback in Game 6. So like I knew crazy comebacks. I'd seen those. And then just tense moments, tense games, down to the wire games. I had seen those. Blowout games. I had seen those. Unsung hero games. Terrence Mann coming out of nowhere. I had seen those. So I kind of knew what to expect and what to feel in each of those moments. And I don't think I would have done it as well as I did if I hadn't had those 4 years for sure.
I obviously was soaking it all up watching those broadcasts. It was incredible. It was good to hear you on that big of a stage in your bag as the world's watching something in an area I knew you'd thrive in. What was it like working with Dwayne Wade as well? I thought you guys developed a lot of great chemistry.
Yeah, it was great. I didn't really know what to expect going in because he literally never had called a real game before. The only game he had ever called was a Rising Stars challenge, I think a couple years back. And that might have been the same year that he messed up the dunk contest, which I didn't actually directly ask him about, but I think he acknowledged at one point over the course of the 2 weeks there. But the one thing I'll say about Dwayne, there are a couple things that really stood out. The first one was how much of a team player he was. And you know how much that means to me. I mean, that's my MO. To me, it's a group, it's a team. I mean, what we see on the court is a team, and we are all a team as well. So to me, everybody plays a vital role in what eventually is hopefully a successful broadcast. And I think Dwayne, he showed up and he just felt that immediately. He knew that immediately. You know, that first week we were there, everybody just assumed you're in Paris, but that first week was in Lille, which was 2.5 hour drive from Paris. The way that I would describe it, and I had described it to people, is it's basically like someone said, "Hey, you're going to go call these games in Paris, or excuse me, you're going to go call these games in New York." And so in your head, you're like, New York City, this is going to be amazing. And then you land and it's Buffalo. It's like, oh, that's not quite the same. Like it's a little different. Wings are good, but not New York City. You know, I
Yeah.
was kind of expecting that. So we get to Lille, and I just figured Dwayne. I'm like, there's no way Dwayne's staying in this crappy hotel that we're in, and he was right across the hall from me the entire time. And so that right off the rip, I was like, okay, he's in on this. He's down to do this the right way. And from that point on, yeah, we developed a great friendship, chemistry, go out to dinners, talk things through, learn about each other, not just on the air, but off the air. And I think it definitely showcased itself down the stretch. And then my favorite part of all of it was the Steph shot over the double team, where he gave the nui, as we call it, the golden dagger shot. If you go and look at the video in the background, you can see. So LaChina Robinson did the women's games with me, and she actually just came to that game. It was the only one the only men's game she came to. And she was sitting and actually listening to Dwayne and I while watching the game live. And which I'm like, LaChina at halftime, I'm like, LaChina, what are you listening to music? She's like, no, I'm listening to your broadcast. That was funny what you said. And I'm like, isn't this a delay? She goes, oh yeah, it's like 2 minutes behind. I'm like, that can't be good. That can't be an enjoyable experience. She's like, it's great. What are you talking about? So if you watch, she's got earphones in, but she is literally jumping up and down after Steph makes the shot and almost like clapping. And Dwayne jumped on my back, and I'm basically giving him a piggyback ride as I'm calling the shot good, and he was losing it. Our entire area was losing it. There was an on-site producer who just looks completely stunned. David Gibson, completely stunned. My stats guy, Tyler, is, I think, beside himself. And if you just look at the reactions of everybody, I think that told pretty much the story any better than I could have with a word. So yeah, he was great. And I don't know if he's going to do it long term. He'll have plenty of options to do so if he wants to, but if he does, I think he has a chance to be one of the best ones doing it.
I thought it was fun. I thought it was very entertaining, and you met the moment without a doubt when it reached that climax with that shot from Steph Curry. How much interaction did you end up having with some of the players? Did you dap up Nico Batum? Was he like, oh, there's Noah Eagle? Did you talk with Coach Lou, seeing him on the coaching staff?
So yeah, I would say coaches more than players for sure. You know, obviously I had a relationship with T. Lou already, so that was great to see him, and he was pumped. You know, the funnier part was Christina Pink actually did the first scrimmage that they had, the exhibition game against Canada. And so she was there in Vegas and saw him there. And he was like, "Oh, Christina, are you coming to Paris?" And she's like, "No, Noah will be there." He's like, "Noah who? Noah Eagle?" And she was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, all right, that's cool." And then he just kind of moved on, which is him in a nutshell. But he saw me there, and yeah, we had a nice little chat. I congratulated him about the extension. Then he goes, "No, congrats to you." I'm like, "Well, congrats to both of us then." And he goes, "Yeah, I like that. I like that." So it was good to see him, Jason Powell, and pretty much all the Clippers peeps were out there, which was cool. And I definitely had a lot of time with Eric Spoelstra, which I guess you can put two and two together with Dwayne. He was very happy to come hang with us before games. Grant Hill, Steve Kerr a little bit, but for the most part, we were doing our thing, they were doing theirs. The players would come, all of them would come say hello to Dwayne, and then a lot would, just come and either dap me up or tap me. So Steph was one of those early in the tournament. But for the most part, no, it was no different than anything else. I just kind of go and do my thing. I do my job and let the rest kind of handle itself.
Did you have much downtime at all to experience some of the
No,
other events?
no, dude. I had a game, at least one game every single day. So we started the first day of the Olympics. The day after the opening ceremonies we had a doubleheader that day. This was Dwayne's first day, and our first game was France and Brazil. And I'll never forget this moment. So the first week in Lille, the stadium, it was a soccer stadium. So the arena, quote unquote, actually sat twice the amount as the arena in Paris. So there were 30,000 people in there. And it was full for it was France's first game, obviously, full an hour before tip. 1 hour before tip, literally not a
Wow.
seat empty. And 1 hour before is when they let the players on. And Victor
This is not
Wembanyama,
LA.
no, it's a little different. It's definitely a little different. But Victor Wembanyama, first player out, an hour before tip off. And he literally just palms like the ball like this, basically, with two fingers essentially, picks up the basketball, flings it from half court, nothing but net. And the place, I've almost never heard a building louder than when that happened. And that was the first thing we did. We weren't even on yet. And Dwayne looked at me and he was like, "Is this normal?" I go, no, it is not. It is very abnormal. So we had that game, and then we had a great game, Canada and Greece. That was our first day. Now, the Greek names were adventurous, to say the least. Giannis Antetokounmpo was probably the easiest traditional, quote unquote, Greek name, even though that's not Greek by nature. But we had a guy, Toliopoulos. There was Harampopoulos. There was Kostas Papanikolaou, which some might remember from the NBA lore. There was Yorgos Papagiannis, who I said was Giannis's father, Papa Giannis. So there were a lot of things there. But anyway, we didn't have a single day off from that point on. The one day off we had was when we traveled from Lille to Paris, and then we had that NBA party that Snoop Dogg came out and performed at, which was awesome. So I was all in on that. But no, I was hoping to get to beach volleyball or swimming or gymnastics. Didn't happen.
You had to insulate yourself a little bit. You're on the grind.
Yeah.
Noah Eagle is with us here on Clippers Talk. Back from the Olympics, back with BIG10 Saturday night. We'll talk about that in just a moment. We'll get his thoughts on the Clippers in this upcoming season as well. If you guys got questions for Noah Eagle, I know somebody's calling him Mona. I think he may have hit the wrong button here. Evilbot's asking about Jeff Van Gundy at the with his Olympic work that he's been doing for years now.
Yeah. The best part about Jeff's Olympic work, and I've known Jeff now for many years from his broadcasting work, I love the man. I thought that was a massive hire by the Clippers. He was huge for the Celtics last year. It's going to be a big loss in Boston, and it is going to be a massive addition in LA. But the craziest thing about how he worked with the Olympics, he was a ghost. He was like James St. Patrick. You never saw him operate. So he was, I think, in scouting more than anything. And my stats guy is a guy by the name of Tyler Freed, whose father is Dave Freed, who's Mike Breen's stats guy. And so he worked with Jeff for years. And Jeff and the Freed family are very close. And so Tyler texted Jeff and was like, "Hey, are you here?" He goes, "I am." He goes, "We don't see you." He goes, "You won't." Like that That was how he was operating. He was so stealth that we
Did you
couldn't
drop the
find him.
cup like in Usual Suspects, the
Yeah,
Kaiser Soze
full
moment?
Kaiser Sose. Yes, I was limping around trying to find him. We could not locate him. It was like the worst game of Where's Waldo that you never find the guy. So I give him tons of credit for operating at that level. But yeah, apparently he was there. I asked Grant, I'm like, oh, is Jeff here? He goes, yeah. I go, I haven't seen him. He goes, yeah, you probably won't. I'm like, what? What is this? What role do you have? So I didn't really get to see him very much specifically, but I heard about the urban legend that was Jeff Van Gundy, Team USA employee.
Just disappears in the mist. We'll ask Noah about Where's Paldo in a little bit here, but I know NBC looks to have a contract signed, sealed, delivered. It's yours with the NBA now, which everybody is excited about. First time since 2002. I remember that Western Conference Finals on NBC for whatever reason. Your dad's working at TNT. You're at NBC. They're taking it from TNT. I'm not saying there's some infighting or a civil war going on right now, but those have to be interesting conversations, Noah.
We haven't spoken in 8 weeks.
Oh,
No, yeah, it's I would say that we're both excited to see what the future has in store. There's nothing that's guaranteed, nothing given yet. So we'll see what it all looks like when the time is right. But I'm certainly hopeful that I would love to be a part of some level of coverage because I love the league. That's that the NBA and basketball are my main passions. And so when there's an opportunity to be more involved within that, you always want to jump at it. So we'll see what that looks like. We'll see what it looks like for me, what it looks like for him. But we would love double bird action in some way, shape, or form. And we know the people seem to respond to that. So we'll see what it looks like.
that's the best double bird you can get.
Little albatross, little basketball albatross.
The only positive double bird out there. So your dad is now officially the voice of March Madness. I think many people have felt like he was for a long time. I certainly did. It was great to see him on the broadcast, but when he's there during March, you've been filling in for him with the Brooklyn Nets. What is it like to be on the NBA grind, I guess, back with your old childhood team and filling in for your father?
Yeah, it's cool. It's different because when I first got to the Clippers, it was literally an opposite coast and a completely different team. There were very little connections to him. The only real connection was Lawrence Frank, who was coaching with the Nets years ago when my dad was calling the game. So I'd known Lawrence since I was literally 8, 7, 8, 9 years old, whatever it might have been. I mean, there's photo of me pre-puberty with Lawrence and a basketball, and I showed it to him, and he's like, "God, I look better with a beard." I go, "You do, yeah." I'm not going to argue that, but because of that, it really just allowed people to form their opinion of me solely on me. When I get back to New York, people had known me from childhood all the way through. And so I think it took a couple games for them to separate what they had known their whole life into what I am now. But after that, it was just off and running and it was great. But yeah, working with different people, I have known Sarah Kustok since I was probably 15 years old. And so for her, I think it tripped her out initially, like, okay, we're working together, fully working together. We had worked in different capacities before, but she loved it by the end of it. We had a great time. Richard Jefferson, I knew when he was playing with the Nets. And at that time, when he first got drafted there, I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And so for him, he knew me when I was 7 years old. And now we're working together so similarly. And he, wanted to test, see where I'm at, see if I could hang and do all that stuff. And we hit it off. So it was a blast. Our producer, Frank DeGrace, is amazing and someone that I've known, and he's been working with them for 25 years basically now. So most of my life. So it was just a different vibe than it was in LA, but it was amazing once you got off and running and once we found a rhythm and once we kind of understood each other, and I just got accepted like I was part of the team very, very quickly, which was always kind of what you want to see and how you want it to go. So we'll see how it goes this year. Hopefully a couple more games added to that slate. I did 12 last year, and we'll see where it ends up when we shake out the schedule.
Yeah, I gotta check the Clippers schedule. I haven't even thought about it. When are those Brooklyn Nets games? Are they coming in around March somewhere in there, and I can visit with Noah Eagle? That'd be nice. I
I
hope you
don't
guys are
know. I
enjoying the
don't know,
visit.
Adam. I don't know.
Let's get to your current gig right now, and it is a prime time Saturday night gig on NBC where you're calling games for, I think, the preeminent conference now with the Pac-12 invasion for the Big Ten. It's been really fun. I know you have Michigan visiting Washington, a rematch of the national championship game. I know both teams are very different now, but you talk about basketball being your first love. How much of an adjustment is it calling these games for football? I know it's not new to you. You've done it over the years already, but now it's a weekly thing for you on Saturday nights.
Yeah, the difference now is I don't have the jigsaw puzzle of how do I get from State College back to LA for a 12:30 tip with the Clippers and Pacers, which I did make, and Ivica Zubats nearly had 30-30. So I was glad to be there for that game, but I was very nervous that I wasn't going to make it. And I had a kid who was trying to sell me something next to me on the plane ride home, which was, I remember I was doing work. And he goes, "What is that?" I go, "Work." He goes, "What do you do? Fantasy basketball?" I go, That's insulting. Come
Far
on,
from it,
man."
dude.
I was like, "Come on, man. It's very much reality. This right here is more real than you'll ever be." And he was like, "Okay, buy this." I'm like, "I'm not buying it." So anyway, I would say that's the first difference is I'm not worrying as much about where the next assignment is, which will change when basketball starts. It still gets tougher. I'm doing college again with NBC. I'm doing the net stuff again. So it's still fitting the pieces, but not quite at the level it was a couple years ago. But the adjustment has been great. I have a really great partner in Todd Blackledge who's been doing this for a long time at an elite level. And when you work with elite people like yourself and like Big Brother Jake and many others, it makes your job easier because everybody gets to pull their weight. And Todd almost pulls our weight collectively in some respects and makes sure that we're always heading in the right direction. Same with Catherine Tappan on the sideline and our entire production crew. And so I just kind of do my work, make sure I'm prepared, make sure I'm ready to go, ready to have some fun. I bring a lot of positive energy, a lot of just period energy. And you know how I am. I BYOE. It's always BYOE with me. There's no caffeine for me. I'm not a 5-hour energy guy like some others who chug that stuff. I couldn't. I don't know who. I'm not a protein shake guy either. Mid game, I can't have that affect the vocal cords. Too much protein.
I was wondering what my problem was this whole time.
But no, it's cool, man. It's been great, and we got a great slate the rest of the way. We got an awesome game this week, as you mentioned, national championship rematch. We've got a potential top 5 showdown next week, and I've enjoyed this new Big Ten because it does add a little extra flavor to a conference that was so heavily defensive focused. Now you've got to contend with these West Coast teams, which is different and new and fun and exciting. So we're enjoying it.
Yeah, the Big Ten patch on a Pac-12, former Pac-12 team still is difficult for me to wrap my head around, but I like it. I love the matchups every week, and another good one Saturday night. Michigan taking on Washington, the Huskies. Noah Eagle on the call. So you mentioned working with elite people, and there's a new one that is coming on the podcast later tonight that I've had the pleasure of working with, Carlo Jimenez. How proud are you of Carlo and taking that torch from you on the radio side for the Clippers?
Well, apparently, if it weren't for me, he wouldn't look old enough to do the job. Apparently, he owes getting glasses to me. Now, I would tell him we can, year 1 to year 2, you can switch the style now. It's time. We can just step it up. Now you can go in there, maybe get some Cartier glasses and really flex on everybody. Show him who's really boss as year 2 approaches. And apparently, the hair thing is not changing. I didn't get the memo that apparently I also sound like the kid on live television. Apparently, I've never been on live television. Apparently, I told him to change his hair. I must have been under the influence in some way, shape, or form when that happened. But no, Carlo is sensational, and not just on air, but off air. And I think you know how much that means to me. I talked about it with Dwayne and how he interacted. but if you watch him interact, he comes from an outstanding family. I've met his family and how he was raised. You could tell that he was going to fit right in wherever he ended up. And so I thought it was great that the Clippers was that destination. And it's a guy who got to be really familiar with LA. I have known him since he was going into his freshman year of college. And you knew early with him that he was going to be a star because you could tell one, the work ethic was off the charts, which is vital to success in this particular field, especially. You've got to be willing to grind and you've got to be willing to go the extra mile. And he always was from freshman year all the way through. It was never something you had to remind him, it was instinctive. And so that goes a long way. The second thing was his comfortability, not just in terms of his broadcasting, but his comfortability interacting. And I think that goes a long way as well. I think that is really important to determine your future success. And then the third one was, how are you as a teammate? And you could tell early that he was a great teammate. And then when I got to do some USC games, I got to see him interacting with guys who were a year younger than him or 2 years younger than him, who now were looking up to him, and the way that he was going back and forth and helping them along and not selfish about how he was going about his business. You go, okay, this kid's got an understanding of how it's supposed to go. And in terms of the on-air performance, I think if you listen to his first game last year all the way through his last one, there's a major leap. I mean, I told him the same thing happened when I did it, and it's true with anybody. If you start at a certain level, and his level was more than good enough when he first got there to be on the air and to have that job, but you're only going to keep getting better at that point. And so the strides he took from the beginning to end of year one were sensational. And I expect now he's only going to keep building because he's motivated. He's self-motivated, and he does seek out opinions from a variety of sources, and he does listen. He doesn't just poo-poo it and say, well, I know what I'm doing. He really wants it. He wants to be coached at the highest level, and I think takes all of that to heart. So I'm looking forward to what year two has for him. I thought you guys were great together. I loved always tuning into your pregame chats or postgame, or even sometimes in the middle of games during a timeout. It was a lot of fun. But you guys sounded great. He sounded great, and I'm pumped because the Clippers are in really good hands. Now, I could never do the TikTok stuff that both of you guys are doing. That's not my forte, but I've been thoroughly impressed with what he's built, and I know that that's only going to continue taking off as well.
Carlo truly in a league of his own there with the TikTok and the
Well,
slick editing he does. Like,
by
my
the
God.
way, though, Jake did tell me that, and this is not surprising, and I don't know what you guys are going to do this year for home games, but a lot of people would come up to him because they wanted photos. And then I can confirm, because I went through this, that Robin also just invites people, like random people who don't want photos, to then take photos. You're like, no, you're going to want the photo. Robin, for anybody who's watching or listening, is the usher of the section in which the Clippers radio would inhabit. And he was the king of angles. He is the great angle photographer, but he's so friendly that he doesn't want anyone to be left out. Even people that weren't asking would get opportunities. So I can't even imagine, considering Carlo already had suitors, the level that it reached when Robin got involved.
Oh, it was basically like a class photo at that point. The group that would expand so much thanks to Robin and Vincent, our guys there. Speaking of this season, of course, we have the Intuit Dome opening up. And while Fred Rogan has been hating on the Intuit Dome for whatever reason, because he's just wants to be the enemy of the Clippers, and he will be known for that.
Yeah, let it happen, man.
Yeah,
That's his prerogative.
Fred embraces the hate. The Intuit Dome experience, and I'm hoping there's a Brooklyn Nets game coming up around March so we can see you there. But how impressed are you with what you've seen so far? I don't know if you've had a chance to get a private tour or whatever, but the Clippers finally have a home, Noah.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part of all of this. Is it's something that they get to call their own, and we experienced it on many levels, where it wasn't just the team itself, the players on the court or the coaches on the bench, that were getting disrespected. It was a lot of us. It was anybody who was a staff member of the Clippers. You were always looked at as secondary or tertiary when you were walking those halls. And I love that building. And I love a lot of the people that do work there, whether it's AB or Vincent and Robin or many others, Bernard in the media room. All those people were great and treated me great. But there were the occasions where we kind of got laughed at or scoffed at, or we were trying to do something and got rejected, whatever it might be. It's just not going to be the case anymore. And I think that you can't undersell the importance of that. I also think you can't undervalue the importance of having your facility basically attached and having everything in one place. That is massive as well. The ease of having everybody under one roof, as opposed to some downtown, some in Playa Vista, some elsewhere, some at home. That's a game changer. It builds camaraderie within an organization. And then on top of that, I haven't been able to see it yet. I haven't gone, but I've seen the renderings. Chris Wallace just delivered a great presentation at the NBA meetings a couple weeks ago where he showcased everything. I've talked to Carlo, I've talked to Christina, I've talked to others who have been there and have really gotten a sense of it. It sounds like a spaceship, basically, that is a basketball mecca. And that's what they wanted it to be. I love the Jersey touch with all the high schools. I love the abundance of bathrooms because you know me, I was willing to shove a 9-year-old out of the way to make sure I could make it to the bathroom in time and get back before I had to be on again.
The old George Costanza move. If there's a fire, look out.
Oh, yeah.
Women and children are getting pushed away first.
No, fire! Yeah, I was out of there. I was out of there. Gore-Tex or not, I was out of there. And I love that they didn't spare any cost or thought. Now, like any new place, arena, stadium, whatever, there will be some kinks they need to work out. I mean, that's just the nature of it. And so I think you do have to give a little bit of a grace period to figure some of that out. And I just know, because I know how the Clippers are looked at and perceived and talked about, that people are not going to give it that if it was other organizations, maybe you would. So I do ask everybody, give it time so that they can truly get everything figured out. But if a year in, they still have issues, that's different. I think that this place is going to be pristine. I think that it's going to be the premier spot for basketball in the country. And we've already seen that there's a lot of faith in that, because the Olympic basketball competition in 2028 is going to be played there, and probably deservedly so. So I give Steve a ton of credit. I gave him another, and I've said this a lot, I give him a ton of credit as well for privately funding the whole thing and not asking for any public dollars, because he's got more than enough. And I hope to see it this season. If not this season, then I certainly hope to see it next season.
Yeah, and you'll definitely be seeing it in 2028 for the Olympics. We know that. It's going to be fun to get comfortable there and finally get to really settle in. I know Coach Lou made a joke about finally being able to leave some shoes or having a locker there, and guys not having to take stuff home with them because they're going to tear it down for the Kings or the Lakers right afterwards. It's just a completely different experience. It'll take time getting used to, but it's a good feeling and kind of that security blanket for Clippers fans now, knowing that they have a home base, as Kawhi put it at Media Day.
I also just know from when the Nets built a new facility a couple years back in Brooklyn, when they first got there, it was kind of makeshift. But when they fully built out the new facility, there's a quote that Luis Scola had that you can go back, and he's correct, which was, he said, they will, when they start to get good, basically, or when people start to realize how nice everything is here, how they treat their veterans, their players, etc., they'll get anybody they want. And then I think 2 years later, they signed Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, DeAndre Jordan, trade for Harden, etc. And obviously it didn't work out the way that they hoped it would because of injuries and vaccines and many other factors. But it did ring true. And a lot of that was a direct result of the pristine facility. And that facility is right near Barclays Center and easy access and all of that. That does make a huge difference. And it was their home instead of sharing it, to your point, with the Devils like they did for years in New Jersey, or being.
I thought you meant the Lakers there for a second.
Yeah. No.
Talking Brooklyn, sorry.
I'm talking the David Putty Devils for sure. And yeah, I think it was huge. It was huge for them. It still is. It's a legit magnet for free agents. And when you're in New York or LA, if you have that, it does give you that extra leg up.
It's going to be fun for Clipper Nation to embrace having their own home and having a top tier, first class, 10 years ahead of any other arena in the world basketball court. It's the greatest place in the world to watch a basketball game. That's what it's going to be. So October 23rd, they're taking on the Phoenix Suns. Can't wait, as Noah Eagle would
baby.
say.
Oh, baby.
Let's get into, I pushed this off for too long, the Clippers off season. What could be to come with this team? We just had media day yesterday, but I want to start with Paul George leaving because that was the initial shoe to drop, the big news. And then he made a couple of comments calling them the B team in LA, saying they got stabbed in the back. His dad mentioned that. He kind of signed off on it. I know he has a podcast. I know how that is. You can put your foot in your mouth sometimes. You can talk too much. There is an edit button. I would have edited that out had it not been live here. But how do you feel about Paul George at this point? And what was your impression of him covering him for 4 years as a Clipper?
I would love edit butter. First of all, I'd love to know what that tastes like.
I can't believe it's edit butter.
Hey, my grandfather did the commercials, several of them for Fleischmann's margarine, which was essentially the I can't believe it's not butter before I can't believe it's not butter, where he played Mr. Cholesterol. Look it up. It's high quality entertainment, and he was excellent in the role, if I do say so myself. That's this was, I think, right after he was in the O.J. Hertz commercials. But that's beside the point. That's a different story for
both involved in a knife, huh?
Oh, Adam.
Is this
You're
live?
cutting the tension, baby. Just cutting the tension. All that to say with PG, I always had good experiences with Paul. And I do think that I just know this from broadcasting even. And I know that you know this, and anybody who has gone to their boss after doing really good work in their eyes for years and said, I think I deserve a raise, and your boss says no, you'll get emotional and sometimes irrational because you're like, how could they not see that? I think that people forget in all forms of business that it is just business at the end of the day. And the way I saw it with the Clippers and Paul, they saw him in one area, and he had publicly said that he was number 2 to number 1, who wears number 2. And he had made that pretty clear publicly again. And then he wanted to go back and say, but I should still be paid like the guy who wears number 2. And I think the Clippers finally said, look, we're going to pay you well. We're going to pay you handsomely. You've said you wanted to retire with this organization. You said you owe us a championship. You've said all of these things. You've handled yourself very well. You were the driving force to getting us to our first conference final, and we do appreciate that. But we also want to make sure that the team's competitive enough to do it. And I look at what Jalen Brunson has done in New York and saying, I'll take slightly less so we can try to be as competitive as possible. And we see that every now and then across sports. But more than the other side, you see guys maximizing what they can make. And I can't blame a person for maximizing what they can make. It's a very finite period of your life that you're going to have this ability to go out there and make millions and millions of dollars. And Philadelphia was willing to pay him, $220 million over 4 years. How can he turn that down? And realistically, it didn't seem like the Clippers blamed him either. It didn't seem like there was ill will from the organization saying, how dare you turn your back on us? Or they said, we understand. It's a business. And so that's what I go back to. But I do think that even when you get your money and you get it from somewhere else, there is this feeling of, well, that was wrong. They wronged me, because there's emotion that comes with this. That's natural for any human being to feel. So I don't blame Paul for how he's handled himself, but he's going to have to go and prove it now on the court. I mean, that's been the case with him for years, is it's time to prove it on the court. And the reality was last postseason was not kind for him. It was not a great series for Paul George, not quite what it was in 2021 when he looked like he was that guy, a guy that could lead a team through a playoff run. He's playing now with 2 awesome players. Now, all 3 of those guys are going to have to stay healthy. The Eastern Conference got a little more interesting in New York City. And the Boston Celtics are running back what was a juggernaut of a team. So they're going to have real competition, not to mention Milwaukee and Indiana and many of these other teams. I mean, I could go deep into both conferences. I'd say the West is a little bit more of a bloodbath, but that's for a deeper discussion. All this to say, I actually think that both sides kind of handled it the way I expected them to both handle this. And that's really where I'm getting at. And now the Clippers get to turn the page. And look, if you're a Clipper fan and you're saying, "Oh, this is not great that we don't have him," I would argue to think a little bit into the future here about what that contract would look and feel like in 3 years when he's going to be 37 years old and making, what would it be, $60 million at that time? That's a lot of money for a guy who has dealt with a lot of injuries over the course of his career and is going to be making that much at 37. So I just look at it as business, and I'm happy for him that he got what he thought he deserved.
How did you feel about the way the Clippers were able to retool and pivot kind of immediately into maybe more of a defensive-oriented team with bringing in Derrick Jones Jr., who was locking up Paul George at times in that first-round series?
I like the mentality. I think that they looked at it and said, look, they still have two premier players in James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. And to me, James Harden proved that with a couple of vintage performances in the playoffs. He wasn't great for the entire series, but he was great when they needed him to be to help them win a couple games. And their viewpoint is, well, if Kawhi is healthy, which obviously is a big if, and they're going to do things, I would say, a little bit differently to try to ensure that this year into the playoffs. But if they had Kawhi, and it was Kawhi and James, they feel like they could have won that series, especially now with these new additions that are younger, athletic, and defensive. And it did feel like that's where they needed to get a little tougher, right? They got pushed around a little bit in that Dallas series. But I think a lot of people undervalue what Norm Powell is capable of. I mean, this is a guy that he's more than capable of being a 20-point per game scorer. And in that series 2 years ago against Phoenix, when they didn't have Kawhi or Paul, Norm had a couple of massive games. So he had 40 plus in a playoff game. That's not simple to do. I don't care who you are. We know that Terrence Mann is a perfect role piece. Ivica Zubac, I still think, gets undervalued around the NBA. And finally, even though it seems like now he quote unquote got paid, he still seems underpaid compared to a lot of guys around the NBA. So you still have this nucleus that you had built. I got to call a Minnesota game last year, so I got to see Cam Christie. I actually am a big fan of his, and I think that he has a chance with the right development and with the right time to be a legitimate NBA player. So you've got these guys that were already in your orbit, and then you add a Mo Bamba who, look, isn't necessarily what people anticipated he would be, given the recruit he was, a one-and-done guy, had a #1 song on the chart about him, all that stuff. But he's still a serviceable piece, and he's going to be battling now with Kai Jones. And people forget about the Kai Jones thing. And Kai wasn't necessarily it's similar, both Texas guys, right? Both guys who came out after a year and both projected to be something great. He wasn't that in Charlotte, but he's also younger than people think he is. And he's also uber athletic. And he's also an element that they haven't had in a long time, since basically the Lob City days at that position. So I'm fascinated to see what T. Lue can do with him. You bring back Nico, who we know just the vibe that he can bring and how that permeates through the rest of the team. So to me, they went in the right direction in how they wanted to build it out. They didn't overspend. They didn't overreact. They said, okay, let's see what we have. And if nothing else, we can reassess when the time is right.
You mentioned Kawhi Leonard there, and maybe they'll revolutionize load management, because if anybody I think has earned the benefit of the doubt, it's Kawhi. We know his body has been betraying him the last 4 seasons. It's been really unfortunate. I'm open to pretty much anything at this point, and I think the Clippers are exhausting all avenues and leaving no stone unturned when it comes to figuring this thing out. And he spoke a little bit at Media Day yesterday, and we had Lawrence Frank and Coach Lue talking about it last week, but his knee still has some swelling. It's almost gone, and it sounds like from Shams Charania and the report he had that Kawhi had a procedure back in May. Just where are you and you're thinking about Kawhi and maybe, I don't know, how they could try to manage this and just get the most out of him now at the age of 33 and hopefully have him available for the playoffs?
Yeah, I think obviously that's the goal is you want them for an extended playoff run, and that's going to be wear and tear on the body come May and hopefully June. But I see it as this. I think for so many years, so what? He's been 5 years with the team. He's already done 5 seasons. I think for these 5 seasons, the Clippers have operated with the hey, we're gonna publicly say how great everything is and not necessarily divulge the dark aspects of this. Now it feels like they're saying, okay, you know what? People I think have read through that. Let's go the opposite way and we're going to reveal maybe some of the stuff that we never would have in the past. And it's actually probably better than what they've said. Because from what I've heard, he's on a better track than what it seemed like it was when Lawrence revealed all that stuff, from what I've heard at least. And again, Kawhi goes about it Kawhi's way. So I can only tell you from this game of telephone. But from what I'm hearing is he's pretty far along and he feels pretty good that he can get back there come opening day. And even if it's not opening day, that opening week, 2 weeks of the season, he should be good to go. The biggest key is, to your point, now once he is back, how do you manage that? Is it a minutes thing? Is it a games thing? Is it a combination of the two, which it likely will be? But I think that the first part of this is people have to stop giving a negative connotation to Kawhi Leonard and load management. I think that they have to understand that his situation and circumstance is incredibly unique given what he has to deal with every single day with a degenerative knee. It's not something that is just a one-time injury that he's managing the rest of his career. This is a multitude. It's an amalgamation of things that have come together now, and he has to really manage it. And he's talked about it at great length that this isn't just about his playing career. This is about his post-playing career as well. And I mean, I've been around enough of these guys, whether it's Doc Rivers or Sam Cassell or T. Lue, who played a long time in the NBA, and they look like they're question marks when they're walking around. Like literally the shape, not questionable to play, but they're shaped. And Doc is hunched over, and he would tell you it's from the wear and tear on his body. And there was no load management at the time. So I do think there's something to that. And a lot of these guys are starting to understand that there's two parts of it. The careers are lasting longer, which is a good thing given that the salaries are going up and you can maximize your spending. So Jeff Green can play for 2 decades, or Andre Iguodala can play for 2 decades, or now Steph Curry or LeBron James or stars Kevin Durant, who tore his Achilles and is literally still playing at an incredibly high level. We can do that now. So there is something to managing that so you can extend as long as you possibly can. And then there's the post playing side of it as well. So I do think that for Kawhi, they're going to have to be extra cautious. I think that James looks like he's in great shape, which generally happens when he's back in a place for a second go around. He comes back ready to go. And the rest of the team is going to have to pick it up. And Norman Powell has been very clear that he believes he should be starting. Now's the time to prove it, bro. If you think that you're ready for that, if you think that you're capable of being an all-star, which he's talked about in the past, this is your time.
Yeah, there's a lot of chum in the water for guys competing for spots at training camp now in Hawaii, in Honolulu. We'll have Carlo Jimenez on from Honolulu later tonight. So if I tell you Kawhi can play somewhere between 55 and 65 games, and the
Hmm.
Clippers don't have any catastrophic injuries, and they're relatively healthy, what do you think their ceiling is this season, given the current roster construction?
So that's the thing. I think that it's so hard to look forward in the Western Conference this year because everybody's good
Yeah.
and everybody's ceiling is good. Like literally, I think 13 out of the 15 teams in the West, if they don't make the playoffs, are going to say this season was a complete and utter failure. I mean, you just go down the list of the teams that were in the playoffs last year. Oklahoma City got better. Denver is going to be Denver. I know they lost KCP, but they're still going
Yeah.
to be exceptionally good. And they believe Christian Brown is ready to take the step. Peyton Watson's ready to take the step. They still have Jokic, the best player in the world, which he proved, I would say, at the Olympics again.
Yeah.
You've got who was a three or Minnesota, and they just traded away Cat. And I'm curious what they do with Julius Randle, but Dante DiVincenzo is a massive addition for them. Anthony Edwards is ready in his mind to be the face of the league. McDaniels proved how valuable of a player he was. Rudy Gobert, another defensive player of the year, probably should have been second place, but that's okay. He wins his fourth. So they're going to be back, right? the Clippers believe that they're going to be back. Dallas made the finals last year. Now, I'm curious how the Klay Thompson experiment works for them, but they believe they're going to be back, even with slight changes to their roster. And then you just look down, Phoenix. Why shouldn't they think with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker alone? And then if Beal looks any bit like the Beal of old, why wouldn't they believe that they're going to be ready to go? Tyus Jones is a great addition for them. And then there's teams that miss the playoffs, like Memphis. To me, is the scariest team in the NBA right now because nobody remembers how good Ja Morant actually is because of the last 2 seasons. 2 years ago with all of his off the court stuff, last year with the suspension leading right into the injury. That dude is at his peak one of the most fun and difficult players to deal with in the NBA. Now you pair that with Marcus Smart, which we really didn't get to see, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and I did a ton of Purdue last year. I can tell you this much: Zach Edey is a 7'4" Ivica Zubac. All right, so put Ivica Zubac and add 4 inches to him. That's what Zach Edey is capable. Now he's going to have to work defensively to get there as a rim protector. That's the one area. But offensively, his hands are ridiculous. Nobody understands how impressive he is catching the basketball. His finishing touch is off the charts. His footwork is elite. And so he's Zoo. So imagine that. Now that starting 5 with a bench with G.G. Jackson, who was awesome last year, etc., and many others. I mean, that's a team that's scary. Sacramento ends DeMar DeRozan. That's a team that's scary. The Lakers still have LeBron, who just proved at the Olympics that he's got a lot left. So that's a team that's scary. You go through, I mean, Golden State, it could be a completely under the radar team that's still scary. So it's so hard to predict. Now to answer the actual question on the ceiling of the Clippers, I still think that they're capable of winning a lot if those guys can play. I still think they're capable of being a playoff team, not a play-in team. But I wouldn't know what to say once they get into the tournament because I think at that point, all bets are off this year in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I'd just love to see a healthy James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. I wouldn't care if they're a 5 or 6 seed. Nobody would want to see that team in a first-round series, even at the top of the West. And I agree with you. Everybody forgets when Memphis was healthy, they were a 2nd seed. They were a 3rd seed. That's another team you kind of just have to think is going to be in the mix for a top 5 seed back in the West.
They're going to be so good, Adam. That's my team where them and Oklahoma City to me are the scariest teams to deal with because look, we saw what Oklahoma City was capable of last year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Clipper fans know how good he is. I think that we all thought he would be an all-star, and the Clippers organization has very vehemently said we knew he would be an all-star. I don't think that they knew he was going to be an MVP level guy every year. I don't think anybody did. And he's built himself into that. He deserves a lot of credit. J-Dub and J-Will, I hate that as a broadcaster. It sucks. But Jalen Williams from Santa Clara is a stud. Lou Dort is an elite defender. Alex Caruso now, elite defender. He is the prototypical championship level role player.
Yeah.
You get another year of muscle on Chet Holmgren. And then our favorite, man, our guy, Isaiah Hartenstein. Talk about a perfect fit. Talk about a guy who has really finally put himself on the map. We knew it. The second we saw it, I will never forget. We go to training camp that year. So this would have been 21-22 season, the year after the conference finals. And we go to training camp in San Diego because it was still kind of the back end of COVID. So we weren't doing Hawaii. And Kawhi got us at San Diego State. So we go, and I was sitting next to Brian and Lawrence Frank. And it was, if you remember, I know you remember, but for those listening, remember, it was between Harry Giles and Isaiah Hartenstein for the final roster spot. Only one of them was going to get it, and it was literally a duel. And going in, everyone thought Giles was going to be the guy. Everyone said, well, this was the number 1 recruit in the country, one and done. If it wasn't for injuries, he's going to find it with this team. And day 1, Brian and I looked at each other and we're like, oh, this is over. This guy's got it. And so we started talking to Lawrence. We're like, this guy's really good. He goes, yeah, we want to keep that a secret for as long as we can. And obviously they could keep it only so long. And I remember seeing Isaiah right after that season ended. I'm like, you're coming back, right? And he's like, I want to be back. I'm willing to take slightly less. I'm here to do it. he had to take that deal with New York. He wasn't going to get that money necessarily from the Clippers, and you just never know with your career what happens. But I'm so happy for him with the contract he got. However, that is brutal for the rest of the Western Conference because that combination of what they've got in Oklahoma City has a chance to be insane. And I think the same could be said about Memphis. And I really think that they match up, those two teams match up exceptionally well with one another. So it's gonna be fun to see some of those duels. That's all I'll say.
OKC is going to win 60 games this season. Like they are going to
You
be the
see,
number one seed.
you say that, but you could say that about almost every team in the West, is my point. You can go down the list and you can just start saying, all right, well, like if everything hits right and Anthony Edwards is the MVP, Minnesota could win 60 games this year. You could say Memphis, if Ja Morant is back to Ja Morant and these pieces click, they could win 60 games. You could say that about a number of the teams in the Western Conference, at least in my opinion. So, yes, I think Oklahoma City going into the season is probably still looked at as the likely number one seed. That's why you got to go play the games. You got 82. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, it's a gauntlet as it always is. I do think the East is probably the best it's been since Jordan left the Bulls in 98. Like they're deeper, and they're top heavier than they've been. And they do have some depth, but the West to me is still hell.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think it's even close. You can look at the East. So let's look at the East right now. Just as an exercise. I think we know Boston. We know what they are, right? New York, we have an idea that they're going to be at minimum the regular season. Excellent. Now, I'm curious playoff time with the minutes that Tibbs tends to play his guys, what that looks like. But they're going to be an excellent team. You say Philadelphia now with PG in the fold, they should be very good. They should be competing in there. Orlando got better with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They should be fun. Cleveland still should be very good with Donovan Mitchell and company. You've got Indiana, who went to the conference finals last year, that I think is good, but I think is probably a slight tier below those teams we just mentioned. So outside of those teams, you've got Atlanta, who I have very little faith in being a playoff team this year. Detroit, very little faith in being a playoff team this year. Miami, who tends to be good, right? But it's just an unknown, it feels like. It just every year you have no idea which version of them you're going to get. And Spo is going to coach the hell out of them. You just don't know. Milwaukee, we know, is going to be in contention at minimum. But it does sound like they've got some stuff to figure out coming out of Bucks camp right now.
Yeah.
I would say, and then what? Washington, Toronto, Charlotte, and my good old Brooklyn Nets. I mean, do you believe in any of those teams?
No. But compared to where the East was, where you had like 2 or 3 teams when LeBron was dominating that were even considered contenders,
yeah, but
you
know why that's the case though, because you had LeBron James, and so anybody who was a free agent that said, okay, what's our best opportunity? Now Golden State was on the other side, but yeah, it was just how it was back in those glory days, as they called it.
There's at least 6 or 7 now really good teams in the East that could compete. I think 2009 was the last time the East beat the West in head-to-head records during regular season matchups. Like it's only happened once over the last 20-something years. Yeah, it's been a long time. The West is still the West, and it is going to be hell. And every night and every game is going to matter more for the Clippers because of this.
I mean, I'm just looking through of the Western Conference. I forgot Houston. Like Houston's going to be really tough. Yeah, they're going to be a tough team, and they're really well coached. I forgot. I mean, I'm curious, what is San Antonio going to look like now? I saw Wembanyama go up against Team USA and go toe to toe with himself. By the way, that was the other big signing for Philadelphia. Yabusele
for dunking on Braun.
Dude, my favorite thing maybe I saw on Twitter after the Olympics was that they were calling him Benoit Wallace. Or no, sorry, Beignet Wallace. Beignet Wallace is an elite nickname.
It's no Zoo Alcindor, but I like it.
Oh, facts.
He is the great Noah Eagle, king of the nicknames, pronunciations, and just all around star when it comes to broadcasting, which is why I nicknamed him the young GOAT like, I don't know, midway through the first year you were with the Clippers. Like, I had seen enough. I had seen enough of LeBron in 2007 to be like, this guy could be the best player ever. I had seen enough of Noah Eagle already halfway through his first year calling games for the Clippers, where I said, no, Moss, I'm good. I know this guy is him. This is the one. And you've only proven that more and more over the years. And I couldn't be prouder to have worked with you. I knew him when. Noah Eagle, working with the Clippers for 4 seasons. And now I can't wait to see what happens here in the future. And I'm watching every Big 10 Saturday night now. I do love the broadcast because NBC, I've been saying this for years. First of all, you know, I have hardcore nostalgia for the 90s basketball and NBC and John Tesh and round ball rock and basketball and all these things. But they have the best production. You guys have the best cameras. I'm a stickler. I'm a video file type guy or whatever it's called. I want to see my S in 4K. I know when I'm watching a game on NBC, it's going to look pristine.
Yeah, that is definitely a point of importance that I've realized when I've gotten there is they stress that. They stress the cuts, the production, the quality, and all of it is top tier. So yes, I appreciate you saying that. I do appreciate you always tuning in, which I know you do. And in terms of the Young Goat nickname, I'm glad and very pleased that Carlo has now gotten that same love because it is deserved. It is very much deserved. So I'm happy to pass it along to him.
The Young Goat 2.0 will be on with me a little bit later tonight.
YG2? Is that YG2?
YG2. That is Carlo Jimenez, and he'll be on the call for the Clippers taking on the Golden State Warriors Saturday in Honolulu, game 1 of the preseason. Noah Eagle will be on Big 10 Saturday night on NBC on the big channel. Here it's Channel 4 in Los Angeles, calling Michigan at Washington, a rematch of the championship game last season. Noah, my friends, it's been a blast. Thanks so much for doing this and staying long. And I should mention, this episode was basically sponsored by the New York Mets because if they hadn't won that game and Noah was sweating it out here, I don't know if he would have been able to come on with me. So thanks for handling your business there, Mets.
I don't know. Team of Destiny vibes? Slight Team of Destiny vibes? I guess we're going to find out. All I got to say is OMG and thank you, Grimace.
Jason Smith somewhere is laughing watching this. Noah, thanks for doing this once again here on Clippers Talk.
Double A, appreciate you. And with the season around the corner, can't wait.
For Noah Eagle, I'm Adam Oslin. Coming up a little bit later, we got Carlo Jimenez live from Honolulu, Hawaii with an update on training camp day 1 in Hawaii on the islands.